Imagine walking through a dense forest or gazing across a vast desert landscape, completely unaware that just steps away lies one of humanity's most profound architectural achievements, a sacred space so perfectly woven into its environment that it becomes virtually undetectable. This isn't fantasy or magic. This is the incredible reality of invisible temples, structures deliberately designed by ancient architects to disappear into their surroundings. These aren't the towering cathedrals or monumental pyramids we typically picture when we think of sacred architecture. Instead, they represent an entirely different approach to spirituality, one that values subtlety over spectacle, integration over imposition, and harmony over dominance. What if I told you that some of the world's most spiritually significant places were created to be hidden, to reveal themselves only to those who approach with patience, reverence, and mindful attention? This is the fascinating paradox we're exploring today, how ancient cultures across continents and centuries developed sacred architecture that seemingly vanishes into mountainsides, dissolves into water reflections, or gets reclaimed by forests. These architects understood something profound about the nature of divinity, that the sacred cannot be contained or dominated, only harmonized with. They created spaces that don't shout for attention, but instead whisper invitations to deeper connection, spaces that challenge our very understanding of what it means for something to be present or absent. Throughout this journey, we'll uncover the philosophical foundations that guided these remarkable designs, from Buddhist principles of impermanence to indigenous beliefs about the spiritual essence of nature itself. We'll travel to breathtaking sites where temples emerge from cliff faces, sink into the earth, or appear only during specific celestial events. We'll discover how these ancient approaches to sacred space offer powerful lessons for our modern world, lessons about sustainability, about our relationship with the natural world, and about finding spirituality in subtlety rather than spectacle. This isn't just about architecture, it's about a different way of seeing, of being, and of connecting with something greater than ourselves. So join me as we step into this hidden world of vanishing sacred spaces, and prepare to have your perception of presence, absence, and the divine completely transformed. To understand why ancient architects would choose to make their most sacred creations vanish, we must first step into a completely different way of seeing the world. This wasn't a design choice born from a lack of skill or resources. It was the physical manifestation of a profound spiritual philosophy. Across countless cultures and continents, a shared belief emerged that the divine is not a distant entity to be housed in a grand palace, but an ever-present, animating force that flows through every leaf, stone, and stream. This worldview sees the sacred as inherently woven into the fabric of nature, something to be harmonized with, not walled off and controlled. Think of the difference between a soaring Gothic cathedral and a shrine carved into a living mountain. The cathedral reaches triumphantly toward the heavens, a testament to human ambition and the desire to bridge the gap between earth and the divine. It is awe-inspiring in its separation from the everyday world. The mountain shrine, by contrast, embodies a philosophy of integration. It suggests that the divine is already here, all around us, and that our role is not to build a gateway to it, but to become more aware of its constant presence. This is the core of ephemeral sacredness, the idea that spiritual power is found in the transient, the cyclical, and the subtle, not in the permanent and the monumental. This perspective is beautifully articulated in Buddhist principles, particularly the concept of anicca, or impermanence. This teaching holds that all of existence is in a constant state of flux. To cling to permanence is to suffer. Therefore, a temple that appears to decay, that is reclaimed by the forest, or that changes with the seasons isn't a failure. It's a perfect functioning teaching tool. It reminds the worshipper that everything, including our own selves and our spiritual understandings, is part of this beautiful, endless cycle of change. The structure itself becomes a lesson in letting go. Similarly, many indigenous traditions around the globe view the land itself as sacred. For them, a specific mountain, a grove of ancient trees, or a quiet spring isn't merely a location for a ritual, it is the sacred being. To build a massive, permanent structure on such a site would be akin to putting a cage around a loved one. It would be an act of confinement, not reverence. The architect's role, then, becomes one of a humble facilitator, to create a space that highlights the natural sacredness without overwhelming it, using subtlety to draw attention to the power that was already there. This stands in such stark contrast to other architectural impulses aimed at showcasing power, wealth, and political might. Think of the pyramids of Egypt or the vast temples of ancient Rome. Their design shouts of human achievement and dominion. They are meant to be seen from miles away, to dominate the landscape and leave no doubt about the authority of the rulers or gods they represent. The invisible temple does the opposite. It whispers, it asks you to come closer, to look deeper, to listen more carefully. It doesn't demand your awe, it invites your mindfulness. This intentional humility creates a far more intimate and personal form of connection. You cannot be a passive observer at a temple designed to disappear. Finding it requires a journey, a seeking. Experiencing it requires your full attention, noticing how the light falls at a certain time of day, or how the sound of water echoes off a hidden chamber. This active engagement is the entire point. The architecture forces you to be present, to participate in the revelation of the sacred. It's a collaborative dance between the builder, the natural world, and the worshipper, where the ultimate goal is not to see a building, but to feel a connection. This ancient wisdom challenges our modern obsession with permanence and visibility, asking us to consider what we might be missing in our rush to build ever taller and leave ever larger marks on the world. It suggests that true legacy might not be in what we build to last forever, but in how gently and harmoniously we can inhabit this ephemeral world. So how exactly did ancient architects pull off this incredible feat of making stone structures vanish? The answer lies in a masterful application of what we might call passive camouflage, using the environment itself as both tool and material. These builders were keen observers of their surroundings, and they developed a sophisticated toolkit of techniques to achieve this seamless integration, working with nature rather than against it. One of the most poetic methods involved the clever manipulation of light through reflective surfaces. Imagine a temple courtyard paved with highly polished black granite, acting as a still, dark mirror that perfectly doubles the sky above. During certain times of day, the boundary between the solid structure and its reflection would completely dissolve, creating the breathtaking illusion that the temple was floating on air or had simply melted into the heavens. Similarly, the strategic use of water was genius. By surrounding a temple with a perfectly placid moat or reservoir, architects could create a water mirror that duplicated the entire building, making it appear as if the stone itself had become as fluid and intangible as its reflection. This wasn't just an aesthetic trick, it was a profound statement about the nature of reality and the divine, suggesting that the material world we see is merely a reflection of a deeper spiritual truth. Beyond reflections, the strategic placement of these structures within the existing landscape was absolutely critical. This goes far beyond simply finding a pretty spot. It was about becoming one with the landform itself. The most dramatic example is the practice of carving temples directly into the living rock of cliff faces. Instead of quarrying stone to build upwards, builders would work in reverse, excavating inward and downward from a rock face. The resulting structure isn't placed on the land, it is the land. Its outer wall is the original, unbroken surface of the cliff, making it completely indistinguishable from the natural mountain from any distance. This technique required an incredible amount of foresight and planning, as a mistake in the carving process was permanent. Another form of strategic placement was the burial or partial covering of structures with earth mounds. This created what are known as terrain buildings, where a grassy hill might actually house a sacred chamber within. From the outside, it looks like a natural part of the topography, a gentle rise in the earth. Only those who know to enter a hidden passageway discover the architectural marvel hidden within, an experience that transforms a simple walk up a hill into a powerful spiritual journey from the mundane world into a hidden sacred realm. The choice of building materials was equally deliberate and symbolic. Rather than importing rare, flashy stones from distant lands to proclaim their wealth and power, these architects practiced a philosophy of local sourcing. They used the very stone that lay at the site or was quarried nearby. A temple built from the same red sandstone as the surrounding canyon walls will, over time, weather to the exact same color and texture, making it blend in perfectly. Vegetation was also actively incorporated into the design. Roofs were designed to hold soil and be planted with native grasses and flowers, effectively turning the building into a continuation of the meadow it sat upon. Vines were encouraged to grow over walls, and grooves were carved into stone to direct their growth in aesthetically pleasing patterns. This wasn't seen as a ruin being reclaimed. It was the building finally reaching its completed state, fully embraced by the living ecosystem. The structure was designed to age gracefully with its environment, not to resist the passage of time but to celebrate it. Perhaps the most mind-bending technique of all was the use of celestial alignment to create temporal invisibility. Some temples were designed to be completely unremarkable for most of the year, only to reveal their true sacred nature during a specific, fleeting moment. This could be during a solstice or equinox, when the sun or moon would align with a precise opening in the structure to beam a shaft of light directly onto a central altar or a carved deity, illuminating it for just a few minutes before returning to darkness. At all other times, the feature that makes the space truly sacred is literally invisible, hidden in plain sight. This transforms the temple from a static object into a dynamic event, a cosmic clock that marks sacred time. It teaches that the divine is not always accessible. It must be approached with patience and at the right moment. This combination of reflection, placement, material, and celestial choreography shows that these builders weren't just constructing buildings. They were engineering profound spiritual experiences, using the very fabric of the natural world as their primary blueprint. To truly grasp the ambition behind this philosophy of disappearance, we must witness it in stone and space, and there are few places on Earth where this concept is made more breathtakingly tangible than at the Ellora Caves in India. Carved directly into the rugged face of the Charanandri Hills in Maharashtra, this isn't a complex of buildings erected upon the land. This is architecture achieved through a process of profound subtraction. Over a period of 4 centuries, starting around the year 550, generations of artisans didn't build up, they carved in. They approached a 2-kilometer stretch of solid volcanic basalt cliff, and with hammers and chisels began the patient, miraculous work of revelation, removing everything that was not the temple to uncover the sacred space waiting within the mountain itself. The result is a staggering 34 monasteries, chapels, and temples that are, from even a moderate distance, completely invisible. The cliff face appears as a natural, untouched formation. There are no protruding towers or external walls to catch the eye. Only as you draw near does the mountain begin to unveil its secrets. Ornate facades, pillared verandas, and intricate sculptures emerge from the stone, not as additions but as integral parts of the living rock. This seamless integration was the ultimate goal. The architects were not trying to impress from afar with a monument to human ego. They were crafting an intimate experience of discovery for the pilgrim, a moment of awe that could only be earned through close, mindful approach. Within this incredible complex, the pinnacle of this vanishing act is the Kailasa temple. Dedicated to Lord Shiva, it is not merely a cave chamber but a colossal, free-standing temple complex that was excavated from the top down. Imagine the audacity of this plan. Instead of building scaffolding upwards, architects and workers started at the top of the rock outcrop and carved their way downward, painstakingly isolating the entire temple form, its multi-story tower, its grand hall, its life-sized elephant sculptures, its ceremonial courtyards from the surrounding solid stone. An estimated 400,000 tons of rock were removed to create this single structure. The outcome is a building that looks as if it was never constructed by human hands, but rather revealed, as if the mountain had naturally eroded away to expose a divine form that had been slumbering inside for eons. You don't look at it and wonder how they built it, you wonder how they found it. This method was as pragmatically brilliant as it was spiritually symbolic. Working from the top down provided immense structural stability, preventing the collapses that could plague conventional construction. But more importantly, it physically embodied a core tenet of Hindu philosophy, that the divine is not something external to be placed upon the world, but an inherent, immanent reality within all of creation. The sacred was already there inside the mountain. The human role was not to create it, but to diligently remove the obscuring layers of ignorance and matter to uncover it. The temple's very existence becomes a metaphor for the spiritual journey itself, the inward excavation required to discover the true self. Furthermore, the fact that Ellora houses Buddhist, Hindu, and Jain sanctuaries literally side by side, all carved with the same reverence for the stone, speaks volumes. It suggests a shared understanding across these traditions that the sacredness of the place transcended any individual doctrine. The primary divinity being honored was the mountain itself. This interfaith harmony, etched into the cliff face, reinforces the idea that true sacred space is universal and inclusive, a natural sanctuary that doesn't belong to any one group but offers a path to contemplation for all who seek it. The quiet, hidden nature of Ellora demands a humility from its visitors, a silent reverence that feels like the most natural response in a place where humanity's handiwork has so gracefully conceded to nature's majesty. While the master builders of Ellora worked their magic into the vertical plane of a cliff, another group of architects on the African continent pursued a different, even more gravity-defying approach to sacred disappearance. Journey to the highlands of Ethiopia, to a place where the very earth seems to have opened up to guard its most precious secrets. Here, in the town named for a saint king, the 11 rock-hewn churches of Lalibela represent one of the most breathtaking and literal interpretations of invisible architecture ever conceived. Unlike any structure built upward from a foundation, these sacred spaces were created through a process of profound excavation, carved downward into the living rock of the mountain plateau. From the surface, the landscape appears as a series of deep, rectangular trenches and courtyards like scars on the earth. It is only by descending into these man-made canyons that the full majesty is revealed. Entire, freestanding churches, meticulously sculpted from the solid volcanic tuff below, their roofs now sitting flush with the ground level, making them virtually undetectable from any distance. This architectural choice was born from a time of both profound faith and dire necessity. Constructed in the 12th century under the direction of King Jebba Meskel Lalibela, this New Jerusalem was created during a period when Christian pilgrimage to the Holy Land was made impossible by surrounding Muslim conquests. The king sought to create an alternative pilgrimage site of unmatched spiritual power right in the heart of Ethiopia. But this ambition had to be balanced with a stark reality: the need for protection. By sinking these churches into the ground, rendering them invisible to the horizon, the architects provided a formidable defense against potential invaders. The churches were hidden in plain sight, their access points and labyrinthine connecting tunnels known only to the faithful, turning the entire complex into a spiritual fortress. Yet, to view this design as merely a strategic defense is to miss its deepest theological significance. The act of descending into the earth to reach these churches is a powerful physical metaphor for a spiritual journey. Worshippers do not climb steps toward the heavens. They walk down into a sunken courtyard, down a narrow passageway, and finally into the cool, dimly lit heart of the church. This deliberate descent symbolizes a return to the origin of creation, a humbling journey into the womb of the Earth Mother, to be enveloped by the very matter from which life is formed. It is an architectural expression of introspection, of looking inward and downward to find the divine, rather than always seeking it outward and above. The thick rock walls muffle the sounds of the outside world, creating a profound silence that amplifies prayer and forces a contemplative state, making the worshipper feel both protected and utterly focused on the spiritual realm. The most iconic of these subterranean marvels is the Church of St. George, or Bet Georges. Isolated from the main northern and eastern clusters, its discovery is a moment of pure theatrical revelation. From the surface, all one sees is a deep, cruciform trench cut into the pinkish rock. It is only by peering over the edge that the magnificent structure is unveiled. A perfect Greek cross, 3 stories tall, standing in majestic isolation at the bottom of its pit. It is not built, it is revealed. The roof of the church, carved with a repeating pattern of 3 concentric Greek crosses, is exactly level with the surrounding ground, completing its perfect camouflage. The journey to its entrance involves a harrowing descent through a narrow, rock-hewn tunnel, a physical ordeal that mirrors the struggle of spiritual seeking. This isn't a temple that announces itself with a towering spire. It is a secret whispered only to those who make the effort to come close, lean in, and dare to descend, proving that the most powerful spiritual experiences are often those we have to seek out for ourselves. But the quest to make sacred architecture disappear wasn't confined to manipulating stone and earth alone. Some of the most ingenious designs achieved their elusive quality not through physical camouflage, but through the mastery of time itself. These architects turned to the heavens, using the predictable yet awe-inspiring movements of the sun, moon, and stars to choreograph moments of breathtaking revelation that would vanish as quickly as they appeared. This concept of temporal disappearance transforms a static building into a dynamic event, a cosmic clock that marks sacred time and teaches that the divine is not a permanent resident to be visited at any hour, but a fleeting presence to be awaited with anticipation and received with profound gratitude. Perhaps the most famous example of this celestial choreography is the magnificent pyramid of El Castillo at Chichen Itza. For most of the year, it stands as an impressive but silent monument. But on the spring and autumn equinoxes, as the sun sets, a miraculous transformation occurs. The stepped corners of the pyramid cast a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase, which merge together to form the undulating body of a giant serpent. This shadowy form appears to slither down from the temple at the top to connect with a stone serpent head carved at the base of the stairway. For a few precious minutes, the illusion is perfect, a divine creature manifesting from light and shadow, descending from the heavens to the earth. Then, just as deliberately as it appeared, it dissolves back into the setting sun, leaving the stone steps bare once more. This wasn't just a happy accident of architecture. It was a precise astronomical calculation built into every angle of the structure, a stone calendar that marked the changing seasons and symbolized the descent of the feathered serpent god Kukulkan to bless his people. The entire spectacle, from its dramatic appearance to its complete disappearance, is a powerful lesson in the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. This philosophy extends far beyond the Maya world. In numerous Hindu temples across India, a similar principle of timed illumination is employed with breathtaking effect. The inner sanctum, or Garbhagriha, which houses the main deity, is typically a dark, windowless chamber meant to represent the womb of the cosmos. However, in temples designed for temporal revelation, a small, strategically placed aperture or doorway is aligned with the rising or setting sun on a specific, highly significant day, often the birthday of the deity celebrated in that temple or a major solar event. On that one morning of the year, a single beam of sunlight pierces the profound darkness of the inner sanctum, traveling across the floor to precisely illuminate the statue of the god or goddess for just a few minutes. In that radiant moment, the divine is not a stone idol but a living presence, bathed in the light of the sun itself. Then the light moves on, and the sanctum returns to darkness, holding the memory of that encounter for another full year. This dramatic play of light and shadow elevates the temple from a mere building to a participant in a cosmic dialogue, a sacred machine designed to capture a moment of grace. This intentional temporal invisibility carries a profound spiritual message. By making the full experience of the sacred available only during a fleeting window of time, these designs force a shift in the worshipper's mindset. It cannot be taken for granted. It requires patience, preparation, and a mindful presence in the moment. The community gathers in collective anticipation, their focus heightened, their senses sharpened, waiting for the celestial event to unfold. This shared waiting and the collective awe of witnessing the event together creates a powerful social and spiritual bond, far more intense than a casual daily visit could ever foster. It teaches that divinity is not a constant, predictable fixture but a cyclical gift, a revelation that comes in its own time. It invites a deep appreciation for the ephemeral beauty of the present moment and a humble acknowledgement that some wonders are beyond human control, governed by the vast, majestic rhythms of the universe itself. If stone and celestial alignment provided one method for achieving sacred invisibility, then water offered ancient architects an entirely different, and perhaps even more magical, medium for transformation. Beyond its practical uses for ritual cleansing and sustenance, water was harnessed for its unique physical properties, its ability to reflect, distort, and obscure, to create some of the most profound illusions of dissolution in sacred architecture. This element became a dynamic canvas upon which the boundaries between the solid and the spiritual, the earth and the heavens, were deliberately blurred, inviting worshippers to question the very nature of reality they perceived. Consider the majestic Angkor Wat in Cambodia, the largest religious monument in the world. While its sheer scale is undeniably imposing, its original designers used water to counter that imposing presence with a breathtaking sense of weightlessness. The temple is surrounded by a massive 200-meter-wide moat, which acts as far more than a defensive barrier. On a calm, clear day, the still surface of this vast body of water becomes a perfect mirror, creating a flawless, inverted duplicate of the temple's iconic 5 lotus bud towers. From the approach, the line between the stone structure and its liquid reflection completely vanishes, making it appear as if the entire complex is floating miraculously above the ground, dissolving at its base into the sky reflected below. This wasn't an accidental byproduct, it was the entire intention. The experience of approaching Angkor Wat becomes a journey toward something ethereal and unearthly, a vision that challenges the observer's senses and prepares the mind for the spiritual transition from the mundane world into a symbolic representation of Mount Meru, the home of the gods in Hindu and Buddhist cosmology. A different yet equally powerful use of water can be found in the spiritual traditions of Japan. The Itsukushima shrine, built on the island of Miyajima, is perhaps the ultimate expression of architectural ethereality. Unlike a temple surrounded by a moat, this Shinto shrine is constructed entirely on wooden pilings over a bay, so that at high tide, the entire complex appears to be floating on the water's surface. The famous Great Torii Gate, standing further out in the inlet, seems to drift between the sea and the sky during high tide, its bright vermilion color contrasting with the blue water and creating a mesmerizing, otherworldly spectacle. As the tide recedes, the illusion is gradually broken, revealing the muddy shore and the sturdy foundations that support the structure. This daily cycle of appearance and disappearance is a masterful physical metaphor for core Shinto beliefs. The fluctuating tides mirror the concept of the constant flow and purification central to the faith, while the shrine's transient, floating quality embodies the belief that the kami, or spirits, are not permanently confined to a single place but are temporary visitors to our world. The structure itself acknowledges its own impermanence and its role as a mere vessel for a presence that comes and goes with the natural rhythms of the world. The symbolic power of water in these contexts runs deep. Across cultures, water universally represents purity, fertility, and the fluid, life-giving essence of creation. By integrating it so fundamentally into their designs, architects were tapping into this primal symbolism. The reflective surface of a moat or a lake acts as a metaphorical threshold, a veil between the physical realm we inhabit and the spiritual realm we seek. To see a temple's solid form begin to dissolve into shimmering light on the water is to receive a visual lesson on the impermanent nature of all material things and the elusive, reflective quality of truth itself. Furthermore, the use of water created a multi-sensory experience that stone alone could not provide. The sound of lapping waves or the quiet stillness of a moat, the cool moisture in the air, and the ever-changing play of light on the surface all work together to immerse the worshipper fully, engaging sight, sound, and touch to induce a state of contemplative awe. This holistic approach to design demonstrates a sophisticated understanding that spiritual connection is not just an intellectual exercise but an embodied experience, facilitated by an architecture that knows how to partner with the elements to humble the human soul and open it to wonder. Beyond the grand illusions created by water and celestial alignments, some of the most profound acts of architectural disappearance were achieved not through human artifice, but through a deliberate and patient partnership with the most powerful force of all, life itself. This is the story of vegetation and organic integration, where sacred structures were designed from the very beginning not to resist nature, but to welcome it, to become a host for the relentless, beautiful, and transformative power of the living world. Here, the architect's role shifts from creator to cultivator, planting the seeds for a building's future transformation and ultimate camouflage, accepting that its most perfect state might be reached long after the original builders were gone, when nature had completed the work they had only begun. Nowhere is this philosophy more stunningly visible than at the Temple of Ta Prohm in the Angkor Archaeological Park in Cambodia. Unlike its more restored neighbors, top Rome has been largely left in the captivating state in which it was rediscovered, a breathtaking dance between stone and silk, between order and chaos. Enormous spung trees, also known as silk cotton trees, and strangler figs have woven themselves into the very fabric of the temple. Their colossal, serpentine roots cascade over crumbling walls, plunge through window openings, and pry apart massive stone blocks with a gentle, inexorable force. Walking through its corridors feels like witnessing a slow-motion embrace. The stone provides the form and the history, the trees provide the life and the momentum. This is not a ruin in the sense of decay. It is a living ecosystem where the temple has become a framework for a new kind of sacred grove, a testament to the Buddhist principle of anicca, or impermanence. The designers of Angkor understood this cycle intimately. They did not see this reclamation as a failure, but as the temple fulfilling its ultimate purpose, to serve as a physical lesson that all things, even our most grand and permanent-seeming creations, are transient and must eventually return to the earth from which they came. This deep reverence for the symbiotic relationship between built structure and living plant was by no means unique to Southeast Asia. Across ancient Europe, from the Druidic traditions of the Celts to the sacred practices of the Greeks and Romans, the concept of the sacred grove was paramount. These were not clearings in the forest with a temple placed in the center. Very often, the grove itself was the temple. The trees were the columns, the canopy was the roof, and the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves was the only illumination. The divine was sensed in the rustle of the wind through the branches, in the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers, and in the silent, ancient presence of the trees themselves. A stone altar or a carved statue placed within such a space was merely a focal point, an accent within the vast, living cathedral. The boundary between the man-made and the natural was intentionally blurred to the point of irrelevance. This fostered a powerful, visceral sense that the divine was not a distant entity to be petitioned, but an immanent force residing in the very processes of growth, decay, and regeneration that surrounded the worshipper. It was a spirituality deeply rooted in the cyclical patterns of the natural world. This organic integration fundamentally reshapes our understanding of what a sacred space can be. A temple that is swallowed by the jungle or hidden within a grove is not abandoned. It is actively participating in a spiritual dialogue that is ongoing and dynamic. It teaches that spirituality is not a static set of beliefs enshrined in an unchanging monument, but a living, evolving process as complex and unpredictable as a growing forest. The constant, subtle changes, the new flower that blooms, the root that finds a new crack, the leaf that falls and decomposes, mean that no two visits to the space are ever exactly the same. This demands a different kind of engagement from the visitor, one of deep observation, adaptability, and a profound respect for the agency of the non-human world. It is an architecture of humility that acknowledges humanity as a part of nature's tapestry, not as its master, and in doing so, it creates a far more raw, authentic, and powerful connection to the mysteries of existence. This profound act of architectural humility, of building to disappear, was never merely a technical or aesthetic choice. It was a language of stone and earth, speaking directly to the deepest truths of the human spirit. The intentional invisibility of these sacred spaces is a powerful symbolic statement, a physical manifesto declaring that the divine essence is fundamentally mysterious, transcendent, and ultimately beyond human comprehension. To construct a towering, permanent monument is to say, we have captured something of the sacred here. But to design a temple that melts into the mountain, that vanishes into the reflection of a lake, or that is only revealed by a specific ray of sunlight, is to whisper a far more profound truth. The sacred is everywhere and in everything, and our greatest act of reverence is to create a space that points beyond itself, acknowledging that we can never fully contain it. At its heart, this is an architecture of radical humility. It is a built form bowing to the natural world, a human creation conceding that it is not the main event. In countless traditions, from Shinto to certain strains of Christian mysticism, there is a shared understanding that divinity is immanent, infused throughout creation, rather than a remote king in a distant castle. By making a structure blend into its surroundings, the architects were physically enacting this belief. They were saying that the mountain itself is the true cathedral, the forest the real sanctuary, and their work was simply to create a focal point, a subtle doorway that directs attention to the sacredness that was already present. This act of building is not one of conquest or domination over the landscape, but one of devotion and integration within it. It is the architectural equivalent of a reverent silence, a space that makes room for the numinous to speak rather than shouting over it. This symbolism is masterfully articulated in the principles of Zen Buddhism, particularly through the art of the Kaizen, or dry landscape garden. Take, for instance, the famous rock garden at Ryonjai in Kyoto. At first glance, it is a stark, minimalist arrangement of 15 rocks set in a sea of raked white gravel. There is no water, no flashy ornamentation, no obvious representation of a deity. Its beauty and meaning are not handed to you, they are withheld. The viewer is compelled to sit, to contemplate, to slowly and patiently allow the garden to reveal its secrets. The carefully placed rocks might begin to suggest islands in a stream or mountain peaks above clouds. The act of raking the gravel each day is itself a meditative practice, representing the endless, flowing nature of the mind and the universe. The garden's power lies entirely in its subtlety and its invitation to deep introspection. It teaches that enlightenment is not a dramatic flash of lightning, but a gradual dawning of awareness, found not in grand spectacle, but in the quiet observation of simple, arranged elements. The garden's invisibility is its greatest virtue. It refuses to impose meaning, instead requiring the participant to project their own consciousness onto it, to complete the circuit of understanding from within. This leads to the most personal layer of symbolism, the invisible temple as a metaphor for the inner journey of the soul. The physical effort required to find a temple hidden in a cliff face or at the end of a long forest path mirrors the spiritual effort required for self-discovery. The journey itself becomes a form of purification, separating the casual visitor from the sincere seeker. The architectural design reinforces this internal quest. The narrow, dark passageway leading to a sunken church in Lalibela is not just an entrance. It is a symbolic descent into the subconscious, a leaving behind of the ego and the distractions of the external world. The act of finally discovering the hidden space, of having your search rewarded with a moment of awe, replicates the spiritual breakthrough of discovering the divine spark within oneself. The temple's exterior camouflage signifies that the true sacred space is not the building at all, but the transformed heart and mind of the pilgrim who undertook the journey to find it. These structures challenge us to move beyond superficial looking and to engage in deep seeing, to understand that the most important realities are often those that are not immediately visible, requiring patience, perseverance, and a quiet mind to perceive. Yet this drive to build skyward represents only one side of humanity's spiritual conversation with the divine. For every cathedral reaching triumphantly for the heavens, there exists a temple carved downward into the living rock, a quiet counterpoint to the monumental impulse. These two architectural philosophies, one of assertion, the other of integration, form a fascinating dialogue across centuries and cultures, revealing profoundly different answers to the same eternal question: How should we, as humans, physically express our reverence for that which is greater than ourselves? The soaring Gothic spire and the sunken Rock-Hewn church represent not a simple binary of right and wrong, but rather two distinct spiritual languages, each with its own poetry and power. Consider the awe-inspiring experience of standing before a place like St. Peter's Basilica in Rome or the Great Pyramid of Giza. Their scale is immediately staggering, a testament to immense human ambition, organizational skill, and often the mobilization of entire societies. They are designed to dominate the visual landscape, to be seen from miles away, and to leave the individual visitor feeling simultaneously exhilarated and utterly insignificant. This is architecture as an expression of divine power channeled through human achievement. The immense stone pillars, the dizzying heights of the vaulted ceilings, and the intricate stained glass all work in concert to create a sense of overwhelming majesty. The message is clear. The divine is majestic, transcendent, and utterly beyond our ordinary world, and our role is to look up in awe and submission. These structures serve as powerful anchors of faith, symbols of institutional permanence, and undeniable declarations of a culture's devotion and capability. In stark contrast, the philosophy behind the invisible temple approaches the sacred from a position of humility rather than mastery. Where a cathedral commands the horizon, a temple like Lalibela retreats from it. Its power lies not in overwhelming scale but in intimate discovery. Not Chinese letter its presence, but in revealing itself only to those who seek it out. This approach suggests a different understanding of the divine, not as a distant king to be praised in a grand court, but as an immanent, pervasive presence woven into the very fabric of nature, waiting to be perceived in the quiet and the subtle. The spiritual experience here is not about feeling dwarfed by a colossal human achievement dedicated to God, but about feeling connected to an ancient, quiet mystery that humbles human endeavor. You are not a spectator in a grand performance, you are a participant in a whispered secret. This fundamental dichotomy extends beyond the spiritual to touch on our relationship with the natural world itself. Monumental architecture often represents a form of conquest over nature. The quarrying of stone, the clearing of land, the bending of natural materials to a precise human design, all speak to a worldview where humanity imposes its sacred order upon the raw, chaotic earth. The invisible temple, however, seeks surrender to nature. It uses the existing contours of the land as its blueprint, chooses materials that will weather and blend in, and accepts that the elements and vegetation will eventually become co-creators of the sacred space. One style celebrates human agency and separation from nature, the other celebrates harmony and integration within it. Both traditions have immense value and serve different human needs. There is an undeniable, soul-stirring power in collective awe, in the ability of a great cathedral to gather thousands in a shared experience of the sublime that transcends the individual. Conversely, there is a deep, personal truth in the solitary journey to a hidden shrine, in the quiet revelation that comes from a one-on-one encounter with a sacred space that doesn't shout but whispers. One inspires through grandeur, the other through intimacy. One reminds us of the glory of the divine, the other reminds us of the divinity inherent in the humble earth beneath our feet. This isn't a contest, but a spectrum of reverence, showing us that our search for meaning can be expressed both by reaching for the stars and by nestling into the comforting, ancient embrace of the ground. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient builders, working without the vocabulary of modern environmental science, intuitively grasped principles that today's green architects are urgently trying to relearn. The invisible temple represents perhaps one of humanity's earliest and most sophisticated expressions of sustainable design, a blueprint for living on this planet that minimizes our footprint while maximizing our connection to the natural world. This wasn't sustainability as a buzzword or a certification to achieve. It was simply the logical extension of a spiritual worldview that saw humanity as part of nature's tapestry, not as its master or conqueror. Every design choice served this deeper harmony. Consider the profound wisdom in their approach to thermal regulation. By building directly into cliffs or burying structures within earth berms, these architects harnessed the Earth's immense thermal mass as a natural insulator. The rock or soil surrounding these spaces acts as a giant heat sink, absorbing warmth during the day and slowly releasing it at night, maintaining a remarkably stable interior temperature year-round. In the scorching heat of an Indian summer, the interiors of the Ellora Caves remain cool and comfortable, while in the cooler winter months they retain a gentle warmth. This passive climate control required zero energy input, no mechanical systems, and created a consistently serene environment perfect for contemplation, all achieved by working with the physics of the Earth itself rather than fighting against it with technology. The commitment to local sourcing went far beyond mere practicality. It was a philosophical stance. Builders used stone quarried from the immediate vicinity, timber from nearby forests, and earth from the very site they were building upon. This drastically reduced the energy expenditure and environmental disruption of transportation long before carbon miles became a concern. But more importantly, it ensured that the structure would visually and chemically belong to its place. A temple built from the same red sandstone as the surrounding canyon would weather at the same rate, developing the same patina, and supporting the same lichens and mosses until it became geologically indistinguishable from the landscape. This is a stark contrast to modern construction that often imports marble from Italy, granite from Brazil, and timber from Canada, creating buildings that feel placeless and disrupt local ecosystems with foreign materials. The camouflage effect itself, while spiritually symbolic, served a crucial environmental purpose by drastically reducing the visual pollution of the built environment. In an age where we struggle with the overwhelming encroachment of urban sprawl and the loss of natural vistas, these temples offer a different model. They preserve the integrity of the skyline, maintain wildlife corridors uninterrupted, and allow the natural beauty of a place to remain the dominant feature. A mountainside isn't scarred by a glaring white structure. Instead, it remains a mountainside, its sacred secret known only to those who approach with reverence. This respectful humility towards the visual landscape is perhaps one of the most urgent lessons for our current era of megastructures and competing skylines. Perhaps the most forward-thinking aspect of this ancient wisdom is its embrace of biodegradability and adaptive reuse. These structures were designed with their entire life cycle in mind. A wooden component that rotted was understood as part of a natural cycle, to be replaced or left to return to the earth. Vegetation wasn't battled with pesticides and weed whackers. It was welcomed as part of the building's evolving character. This stands in radical opposition to much of modern architecture, which relies on toxic sealants, non-biodegradable composites, and energy-intensive maintenance to fight the natural processes of decay and change, creating a permanent burden on the environment. The invisible temple teaches us that the most ethical building might be one that is designed to eventually disappear completely, leaving the land unharmed for future generations. This ancient wisdom is no longer confined to the history books or remote archaeological sites. A powerful and beautiful revival is underway as a new generation of architects and designers looks to these timeless principles for inspiration. creating contemporary sacred spaces that speak directly to the ecological and spiritual anxieties of our modern age. This isn't about mere imitation or historical pastiche. It's a profound re-engagement with the core philosophy of integration, using cutting-edge materials and technologies to achieve the same goal of harmonious disappearance. We are witnessing a global movement that seeks to heal the rift between the built environment and the natural world, building sanctuaries that offer solace not just for the soul, but for the planet itself. Consider the stunning chapel of the Holy Cross in Sedona, Arizona. Though completed in the 1950s, its ethos is a direct continuation of this ancient conversation. Rather than placing a monument atop the iconic red rock formations, the architect Marguerite Brunswick Stord had the vision to build directly into the very face of the cliff. The chapel appears as a natural extension of the stone, its stark, modern cross seeming to grow from the living rock. From a distance, it's almost invisible, its neutral color palette blending seamlessly with the desert hues. Visitors don't approach a towering facade. They enter a quiet, contemplative space that frames the majestic landscape through its massive windows, making the outside vista an integral part of the sacred experience inside. It is a powerful testament to how a millennia-old idea can be translated into a modernist idiom with breathtaking results. Moving across the globe to Japan, we find another masterful modern interpretation at the Water Temple, designed by the renowned architect Tadao Ando for the Hompukuji Temple in Awaji. Ando took the ancient concept of using water for reflection and illusion and elevated it to a new level of minimalist poetry. To approach the temple, one must descend a sweeping spiral staircase that seems to plunge directly into a vast, still pond. But this is no ordinary pond. It is the temple's roof, covered in water and dotted with lotus flowers. The worshipper literally descends beneath the water's surface to enter the main hall, a serene, circular chamber painted a vivid vermilion red. The experience is a profound metaphor for purification and rebirth, using the element of water not just as a mirror, but as a veil and a threshold. It is a space that feels both utterly contemporary and deeply ancient, demonstrating that the principles of invisible sacred architecture are not bound by time or style, but are universal and endlessly adaptable. The motivations behind this revival are twofold, addressing both our external environmental crisis and our internal spiritual yearning. On a practical level, these modern interpretations are paragons of sustainability. Green roofs like the one on the Water Temple provide natural insulation, reduce stormwater runoff, and create habitats for local wildlife. Underground construction leverages the Earth's stable thermal mass to drastically reduce energy needs for heating and cooling. The use of reflective glass and locally sourced materials minimizes visual intrusion and the carbon footprint associated with transportation. These buildings are not just symbols of environmentalism. They are active, functioning participants in their ecosystems, offering a tangible blueprint for a more sustainable way of building that is in dire need today. Perhaps more importantly, these spaces fulfill a deep, growing hunger for authentic connection and peace in our hyper-stimulated, digitally saturated world. They offer a refuge from the noise and clutter of modern life, a place where the only notifications are the patterns of light on a wall, and the only soundtrack is the whisper of the wind. By demanding a journey, by revealing themselves slowly, and by forcing us to be present in our surroundings, they facilitate a state of mindfulness that is increasingly difficult to achieve. They prove that the desire for sacred spaces that humble us, that connect us to something larger than ourselves, and that honor the natural world is not a relic of the past, but a timeless human need that is more relevant now than ever before. Walking into a space designed to disappear does something remarkable to the human mind. It shifts our entire mode of perception from one of passive consumption to one of active seeking. This isn't the overwhelming awe inspired by a soaring cathedral, which can sometimes make an individual feel small to the point of insignificance. Instead, the awe evoked by an invisible temple is a quieter, more personal sensation, a feeling of having been let in on a profound secret of the universe. This subtle distinction is critical. The experience is less about being dwarfed by a display of power and more about feeling a deep, resonant connection to the hidden order and beauty of the natural world. This specific type of awe is intimately linked to feelings of humility, not the humility of subjugation, but the humility of realizing you are a part of an intricate, intelligent system far greater than yourself. It's the difference between staring up at a skyscraper and patiently tracking a bird's flight until it disappears seamlessly into the canopy of a forest. One impresses you with human achievement, while the other connects you to the quiet magic of existence itself. This shift is possible because these spaces fundamentally demand mindfulness. You cannot rush through a sunken church or a forest-engulfed ruin. The journey itself forces a slower pace. You must watch your step on an ancient, narrow path. You must pause to orient yourself. You must listen for the specific sound of water that leads you to a hidden shrine. This active sensory engagement pulls you completely into the present moment, effectively quieting the constant internal chatter of modern life, the to-do lists, the worries, the digital notifications. The architecture itself becomes a guide for meditation, requiring you to look closer, listen more carefully, and feel more deeply. The act of discovery, of finally laying eyes on the structure after a deliberate search, releases a small burst of dopamine, the brain's reward chemical. This neurobiological response ties a feeling of pleasure and accomplishment to the act of seeking and finding the sacred, fundamentally rewiring the experience of worship from one of passive reception to one of active, rewarding participation. The temple doesn't hand you a spiritual experience. You have to co-create it through your own attentive effort. The psychological benefits of this kind of environment are supported by a growing body of research in environmental psychology, particularly through the lens of the biophilia hypothesis. This concept, popularized by biologist E.O. Wilson, suggests that humans possess an innate, genetically programmed tendency to seek connections with nature and other forms of life. Invisible temples are the ultimate expression of biophilic design. They don't just have a potted plant or a window with a view, they are utterly fused with their natural setting. This deep integration taps into our primal need to be in natural environments, which has been shown to lower cortisol levels, reduce heart rate, and alleviate feelings of stress and anxiety. When you are in a space that is literally part of a mountain or woven into the roots of an ancient tree, the psychological separation between indoors and outdoors vanishes. This erasure of boundaries creates a profound sense of belonging and peace, as if the body and mind are returning to a state they instinctively recognize as home. It's a feeling of safety and rightness that is often elusive in our sharp-edged, manufactured urban landscapes. Furthermore, these spaces serve as a powerful antidote to the sensory overload that characterizes so much of contemporary life. We are constantly bombarded with bright lights, loud sounds, and a relentless stream of information. Invisible sacred spaces are often characterized by their quietness, their soft, natural light, and their muted color palettes of stone, earth, and greenery. This sensory simplification allows our nervous system to downshift out of a state of high alert and into a state of calm awareness. This isn't just a poetic notion, it's a neurological reality. The reduced sensory input allows the brain's prefrontal cortex, associated with introspection and reflective thought, to become more active. This creates the ideal mental conditions for the kind of deep, personal introspection that is at the heart of genuine spiritual inquiry. The space holds you in a gentle embrace, allowing you to turn your attention inward without distraction. Ultimately, the most lasting psychological effect may be the recalibration of our value system. In a world that often celebrates the loud, the new, the obvious, and the immediate, spending time in a place that derives its power from subtlety, age, and hidden beauty challenges our conditioned preferences. It teaches us to find value in patience, to appreciate the slow reveal, and to understand that the most meaningful things in life are often not immediately apparent. They require our time, our attention, and our willingness to look beyond the surface. This lesson, absorbed not through a lecture but through lived experience, can ripple out into a person's daily life, encouraging a more mindful, appreciative, and less frantic way of moving through the world. The temple disappears, but the psychological shift it inspires can become a permanent part of how we see everything. This universal impulse to build sacred spaces that recede into their surroundings is a beautiful thread woven through human history, yet the pattern it creates is incredibly diverse, with each culture adding its own distinct color and texture based on its unique environment and spiritual beliefs. In the lush, volcanic landscapes of Mesoamerica, this philosophy manifested in a powerful ritual of architectural cycles. The great pyramidal temples of the Maya and the Aztecs were not static monuments meant to stand unchanged for eternity. Instead, they were often conceived as living entities with life cycles. A ruler might commission a new layer to be built over an existing pyramid, effectively entombing the old structure within a new shell. Over time, if a site was abandoned, the jungle would swiftly move in, its roots and vines weaving a green shroud over the stone, reclaiming the man-made mountain for the earth. This wasn't seen as a tragic loss, but as a part of a sacred process, a symbolic death and burial that made way for future rebirth, a physical echo of their cosmological beliefs in cyclical time and regeneration. Traveling to the stark and dramatic fjords of the ancient Nordic world, we find a completely different expression of the same principle. Here, the sacred was not about enveloping structures, but about choosing sites of raw, untamed nature. The Vikings and their predecessors often used natural formations like unusual rock outcrops, sacred groves, or waterfalls as their temples. A herger, for instance, was typically just a simple stack of stones, an altar built without mortar, placed in a remote location, perhaps on a windswept headland overlooking the churning sea or deep within an old-growth forest. Its power derived entirely from its setting. There was no roof, no enclosing walls, only the vast dome of the sky above and the challenging landscape all around. To reach such a place required a deliberate and often difficult pilgrimage, ensuring that only the most determined would arrive. This practice reflected a worldview where the divine was not separate from the forces of nature, but was embodied in the terrifying and awesome power of the storm, the sea, and the wilderness, a deity that could only be approached on its own terms in its own domain. High in the thin air of the Himalayas, Buddhist monks pursued invisibility not through concealment but through elevation. Monasteries like Bhutan's Takt's Palphog, the famous tiger's nest, are architectural marvels perched precariously on sheer cliff faces. From a distance, their white walls and golden roofs appear to be almost floating, clouds swirling around them, making it impossible to distinguish where the rock ends and the building begins. This design achieves a different kind of disappearance, not into the earth, but into the heavens. The arduous climb to reach them is a central part of the spiritual practice, a physical purification that mirrors the mental ascent toward enlightenment. By building in such inaccessible places, the monks didn't just find solitude. They placed their communities between the earthly realm below and the infinite sky above, becoming literal bridges between the material and the spiritual, their homes dissolving into the elemental realm of air and light. Meanwhile, across the vast expanse of the Pacific, Polynesian cultures developed a concept of sacred space that was often intentionally unmarked to the untrained eye. The mari, or ceremonial grounds, could be as simple as a cleared area of packed earth, a platform of coral rock, or an arrangement of stones nestled within a grove of trees. There were no towering spires or carved facades to announce their presence to outsiders. Their sacredness was not in their architecture but in their use, in the rituals performed there, and the community's collective memory of those events. A mari blended so seamlessly into the landscape that it was invisible to all but those who knew of its purpose, its power lying in its subtlety and its deep connection to the ancestral land, or Aina. This approach reflects a worldview where the entire world is already sacred, and human ritual simply activates that inherent sanctity in specific locations, needing no grand monument to validate it. From the buried pyramids of Mesoamerica to the sky-high monasteries of the Himalayas, and from the simple stone altars of the Norse to the unmarked clearings of Polynesia, we see a stunning array of solutions to the same spiritual challenge. Each culture, guided by its environment and its mythology, found a unique way to express a shared understanding that the most profound encounters with the divine occur not in spaces that dominate their surroundings, but in those that humbly and sometimes secretly become one with them. This incredible global diversity points to a deep, innate human yearning to find our place within the natural order, not above it, using architecture not as a declaration of self, but as a quiet, respectful gesture of belonging. This profound integration between architecture and ritual is where the true genius of invisible temples comes alive. The very design of these spaces wasn't just a backdrop for worship. It was an active, choreographed participant in the spiritual experience itself, shaping ceremonies in ways that a conventional building simply could not. The architects understood that the journey to the sacred is as important as the destination, and they built that journey, with all its physical and psychological challenges, directly into the landscape and the structure. This transforms a ritual from a series of recited prayers into a full-bodied, immersive drama where the environment itself guides the worshipper toward a state of heightened awareness and connection. Consider the temples designed to align with celestial events, like the equinox at Chichen Itza. The ritual here isn't confined to the human participants. It includes the sun, the earth, and the precise angles of the pyramid. The ceremony is scheduled for that one specific, fleeting moment when the cosmic clock strikes. The entire community gathers not just to perform a rite, but to witness a miracle of alignment, to see the divine made manifest in a slithering shadow serpent. This creates an unparalleled sense of anticipation and collective focus. The spiritual potency is magnified because the event is beyond human control. It is a gift from the cosmos, a momentary window where the veil between worlds is pulled back. The ritual's power is inextricably linked to its temporariness. It cannot be performed on any other day. This forces a mindfulness and a preciousness around the event, teaching that the sacred appears on its own schedule, and our role is to be prepared, patient, and utterly present when it does. A completely different, yet equally powerful, ritualistic experience is crafted by subterranean temples like those in Lalibela. Here, the architecture dictates a ritual of descent. The ceremony begins not at the altar, but at the top of the steps leading down into the sunken courtyard. To enter, one must physically move downward, leaving the bright, open world of the everyday behind and descending into the cool, enclosed, and often darker space below. This physical act is a powerful metaphor for the spiritual journey inward, into the subconscious, into the realm of ancestors, or into the underworld for rebirth. The very air changes, the sounds of the outside world fade, and the weight of the earth above creates a feeling of being held and enclosed. A ritual performed in such a space, perhaps involving chanting that resonates off the close rock walls or meditation in near total darkness, leverages the psychology of the environment to produce feelings of safety, introspection, and profound connection to the origins of life. The architecture facilitates a visceral experience of going back to the source. Furthermore, the hidden nature of these temples fundamentally shaped the practice of pilgrimage. An initiation rite didn't begin upon arrival at the temple. It began the moment the seeker left home. The difficult journey navigating a dense forest, climbing a remote mountain, or following an unmarked path through a desert was the first and most important test. This physical struggle served as a purification process, separating the casual curious from the sincerely devoted. The exhaustion, the disorientation, the necessity of relying on faith and memory rather than a clear signpost, all served to strip away the ego and the distractions of ordinary life. By the time the pilgrim finally caught sight of the hidden temple, perhaps glimpsed through trees or at the bottom of a canyon, their mind was primed for revelation. The moment of discovery was itself a sacred part of the ritual, a reward for perseverance and a powerful metaphor for the sudden, unexpected nature of spiritual insight. The sacred wasn't just waiting at the altar, it was embedded in the entire arduous process of seeking it out. These practices collectively underscore a radical idea that stands in contrast to more accessible forms of worship, that the sacred must be earned through sincere effort and mindful pursuit. It is not a utility readily on tap, but a profound connection that requires preparation, patience, and a willing engagement with mystery. The invisible temple, by its very design, filters for this type of seeker. It refuses to offer easy answers or instant gratification. Instead, it offers a transformative experience where the boundaries between the ritual, the participant, and the environment dissolve, creating a holistic encounter that can reshape a person's understanding of their place in the universe. The building doesn't just host the ceremony, it performs it. This inherent vulnerability, this beautiful fragility, is the ultimate paradox of these architectural marvels. The very philosophy that gives them their profound spiritual power, the conscious decision to surrender to nature's processes, is also what places them in a state of perpetual peril. Preservationists face a uniquely complex challenge, one that goes far beyond simple restoration. How do you save a building that was designed from its very inception to decay, to be reclaimed, and to eventually vanish? This isn't a battle against time. It's a nuanced negotiation with the original intent of the architects, forcing us to ask what we are truly trying to preserve and for whom. Take the mesmerizing and precarious state of Ta Prohm in Cambodia. The iconic embrace of the spung and strangler fig trees is what makes the site so powerfully evocative, a perfect picture of nature's patient reclamation. Yet, this beautiful symbiosis is also a slow-motion act of destruction. Those very roots that tourists marvel at are, millimeter by millimeter, prying apart ancient stonework, undermining foundations, and threatening to cause catastrophic collapses. The preservation team on site is engaged in a constant, delicate ballet. They cannot simply remove the trees. That would destroy the site's authentic character and violate the spiritual principle it embodies. Instead, they must carefully monitor the growth of each root, sometimes pruning them, sometimes installing nearly invisible steel supports to bear the weight, all in an effort to slow the inevitable without stopping it completely. It's a holding pattern, a managed decline that acknowledges the temple's destiny while trying to prolong its life for future generations to witness. Beyond the gentle assault of vegetation, these sites face an even more relentless and impersonal threat: climate change. For temples designed to work in harmony with a stable environment, the new extremes of our planet are catastrophic. Rising sea levels and increased storm surges pose an existential threat to coastal and submerged sites. The ancient causeways and delicate foundations of places like the Itsukushima Shrine in Japan, which were calibrated for specific tidal ranges, are now being battered by waves of unprecedented force and height. The very water that gives the shrine its ethereal, floating quality is now literally eating away at its structural integrity. Similarly, in desert regions, more intense and frequent cycles of drought and flash flooding are eroding the soft stone of rock-cut temples, washing away ancient murals and undercutting cliffs that have stood for millennia. The original architects designed for a predictable natural rhythm. They could never have anticipated the chaotic violence of a climate in crisis. Confronted with these multifaceted threats, preservation has had to evolve into a high-tech discipline. The goal is no longer just to repair, but to meticulously document and digitally immortalize. Using advanced light detection and ranging technology, or LiDAR, archaeologists can now create incredibly precise three-dimensional maps of an entire site, even through dense jungle canopy. This data creates a permanent digital record, a high-fidelity blueprint that will survive long after the original stones may have crumbled. Drones equipped with high-resolution cameras capture aerial perspectives that reveal structural stresses and water drainage patterns invisible from the ground. Inside the temples, sophisticated environmental monitoring systems track minute changes in humidity, temperature, and light exposure, allowing conservators to understand exactly how the microclimate is affecting the delicate stone and paintings. This scientific approach allows for minimally invasive interventions, precisely targeted to address the most critical issues without altering the overall aesthetic of managed decay. All of this effort, however, leads us to a profound and deeply ethical crossroads. If the original spiritual intent of these temples was to honor impermanence and the natural cycle of decay and rebirth, do our preservation efforts amount to a well-meaning but fundamental disrespect? Are we, in our desire to save these wonders, inadvertently freezing them in a state of artificial limbo, denying them the very dissolution that gives them their deepest meaning? This is the central dilemma. There is a strong argument to be made that for a temple like Ta Prohm, a complete collapse and return to the jungle is not a failure, but the final, triumphant chapter of its story, the ultimate fulfillment of its design. To prevent this is to prioritize our contemporary cultural and tourist desires over the ancient philosophical principles the site represents. Yet, the counterargument is equally powerful. These sites are not just spiritual statements, they are irreplaceable repositories of human history, art, and engineering genius. They belong not only to the past but to all of humanity's future. Allowing them to disappear completely would be an incalculable loss to our collective understanding of who we are and what we have achieved. The work of preservation, therefore, becomes an act of profound responsibility, a way of holding a door open between the past and the future. Perhaps the modern solution lies in redefining what preservation means. It may not be about stopping time, but about carefully and respectfully stewarding the process of change, ensuring that even as these temples continue their dialogue with nature, we can learn from them for as long as possible. It is about using our technology not to conquer nature, but to better understand its conversation with these sacred stones, allowing us to make more informed and humble choices about when to intervene and when to simply step back and bear witness. But how do we peer into the heart of a mountain or see through centuries of dense jungle growth to understand these masterpieces of concealment? The answer lies not with shovels and trowels alone, but with a stunning array of 21st century technologies that are fundamentally rewriting the history of sacred architecture. These tools act as a form of non-invasive X-ray vision, allowing archaeologists to map, measure, and model these sites in breathtaking detail without ever touching a single stone, preserving their delicate integrity while revealing secrets our eyes could never perceive. Light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, has been nothing short of a revolution. This technology involves mounting a laser scanner on an airplane or drone and flying it over a target area, like the impenetrable rainforests of Guatemala. The lasers penetrate the smallest gaps in the thick jungle canopy, bouncing off the ground below and returning to the sensor. By measuring the time it takes for each laser pulse to return, a computer can strip away every single leaf, vine, and tree to create a pristine, three-dimensional map of the actual Earth's surface. The results have been staggering. In the Maya Biosphere Reserve, LiDAR revealed over 60,000 previously unknown structures, entire cities, fortifications, roadways, and yes, hidden temples, all woven into the jungle in a way that made them completely invisible to anyone standing just a few feet away. This has proven that the practice of integrated, disappearing architecture wasn't an anomaly. It was the dominant, widespread urban planning philosophy for an entire civilization, transforming our understanding of their relationship with the natural world from one of conquest to one of profound harmony. Beyond the jungle, other tools peer into the earth itself. Ground-penetrating radar sends high-frequency radio waves into the soil, which bounce back when they hit changes in density, like a buried wall or a subterranean chamber. This is how researchers can confidently map the layout of a sunken church complex like Lalibela without any destructive digging, identifying potential tunnels or chambers that haven't been entered for centuries. Meanwhile, high-resolution drone photography creates photogrammetric models so precise they can detect minuscule erosion patterns on a cliff face, allowing preservationists to identify which parts of a rock-cut temple are most vulnerable to weathering and address the problem before a single carving is lost. Drones can also capture a site from every conceivable angle, building a digital twin so accurate it can be used for virtual reality explorations or to 3D print exact replicas of fragile structures for study. This technological leap does more than just satisfy our curiosity. It fosters a deep, humbling respect for the ancient master builders. By using LiDAR to chart the precise celestial alignments of a temple or GPR to confirm the sophisticated acoustics of a subterranean chamber, we are essentially reverse engineering their genius. We can now see the mathematical precision, the geological understanding, and the astronomical knowledge they possessed, realizing that their achievements were not the result of primitive guesswork but of meticulous observation and brilliant engineering. It allows us to appreciate that the harmony they achieved was a deliberate, sophisticated intellectual pursuit, a marriage of spirit and science that we are only now beginning to fully comprehend with our most advanced tools. This digital renaissance ensures that even as these sites continue their slow dance with nature, their complete story is being preserved for all time, offering an endless resource for discovery and a testament to human ingenuity across the millennia. Yet this incredible power of technology to reveal what was meant to remain hidden presents us with a profound ethical quandary. We now possess the tools to map, photograph, and share the world's most secret sacred spaces with a global audience at the click of a button, but should we? This is not a simple question of exploration versus preservation. It's a deeply complex issue that pits our thirst for knowledge and wonder against the fundamental rights of cultural sovereignty and spiritual privacy. For many indigenous and local communities, these sites are not ancient relics or archaeological trophies. They are living, breathing centers of their cultural and religious life. A temple hidden in a cliff face might be the site of ongoing ceremonies, a place where ancestors are communed with, or a repository of knowledge accessible only to initiated elders. To flood such a place with tourists, cameras, and the noise of the modern world isn't just an inconvenience. It can be a form of spiritual violation, a desecration of a space whose power is intrinsically linked to its seclusion and the intentional effort required to reach it. The potential for physical damage from increased foot traffic is a clear and present danger: the erosion of ancient steps, the introduction of moisture and pollutants from human breath and touch, the temptation for visitors to take a small stone as a souvenir. But the more insidious harm is often intangible. The very act of making a secret public can drain it of its spiritual potency. The sense of awe that comes from a difficult, personal pilgrimage is fundamentally different from the experience of joining a curated tour group. When a sacred space becomes a tourist attraction, its primary function can subtly shift from facilitating connection with the divine to generating revenue and satisfying curiosity. This commercialization risks turning a profound spiritual symbol into a commodity, a backdrop for social media photos rather than a gateway to introspection. The sacred silence necessary for prayer and meditation is replaced by the chatter of guides and the shutter clicks of cameras, fundamentally altering the energy and purpose of the place. Navigating this delicate balance requires a new paradigm for cultural stewardship, one that prioritizes respect and consent over unfettered access. Forward-thinking approaches are emerging that seek to honor both the global significance of these sites and the rights of the communities who are their traditional guardians. One powerful model is community-led tourism, where the local indigenous group retains control over all aspects of access. They decide who enters, when, and under what conditions. They provide the guides, ensuring the narrative is told from their perspective, and the economic benefits flow directly back into their community. This transforms tourism from an extractive industry into a form of cultural exchange and sustainable economic development. Another crucial tool is the strategic use of digital surrogates. Why physically bring thousands of people to a fragile, subterranean church when we can create an immersive, high-resolution virtual reality experience? These digital reconstructions, made from LiDAR scans and photogrammetry, can allow scholars and the curious public to explore every inch of a site in minute detail without ever setting foot in it, preserving the physical and spiritual integrity of the original for those who use it for worship. Limited access through a strict permit system or seasonal closures is another essential strategy, ensuring that these places have time to rest and regenerate, much like a natural ecosystem. Ultimately, the ethical imperative is to shift our perspective. The value of an invisible temple is not solely in its architectural genius or its age. Its deepest value lies in its continued role as a living sacred place. Our primary goal should not be to uncover every secret for public consumption, but to ensure these spaces can continue to fulfill their spiritual purpose for the communities that have safeguarded them for generations. This means sometimes accepting that the most respectful way to honor a sacred site is to leave it undiscovered, unphotographed, and unknown to the wider world, allowing its mystery and power to remain intact for those who truly understand its meaning. It is a lesson in humility, reminding us that not everything beautiful or ancient is ours to possess or even to see. Some wonders hold their power precisely because they choose to remain, in the most sacred sense, invisible. This ancient yearning to encounter the sacred not in grand halls but in the quiet, unassuming embrace of nature is experiencing a powerful resurgence in our modern world. We are witnessing a profound shift in spiritual practice, a move away from the formal and the institutional toward the personal, the experiential, and the deeply ecological. The core principles of those invisible temples, humility, integration, and a focus on subtle revelation, are now flowering into a diverse array of contemporary movements that seek to heal our disconnection from the natural world and from our own inner selves. This isn't about building new stone structures, but about applying that ancient architectural philosophy to the very way we live our lives and seek meaning. Consider the Japanese practice of Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing. This is far more than a simple walk in the woods. It is a deliberate, mindful immersion in the atmosphere of the forest, a sensory invitation to let the natural world wash over you without agenda or destination. There is no doctrine to recite, no deity to petition. The sacred is encountered in the scent of damp earth, the intricate pattern of moss on a stone, the dappled light filtering through the canopy, and the sound of wind moving through leaves. This practice directly echoes the philosophy of temples like those engulfed by the Cambodian jungle, where the boundary between the man-made and the natural is dissolved. Forest bathing teaches that the temple is not a destination to be reached, but a presence to be felt, a state of harmonious being that we can step into whenever we choose to be fully present in a natural space. It is a form of worship that requires nothing but our attention. This desire for integrated spirituality is also fueling the creation of personal sacred spaces. People are carving out small altars in their gardens, creating meditation nooks under a favorite tree, or simply designating a windowsill with a view of the sky as a place for daily contemplation. These are modern, personal versions of the hidden shrines and groves of old. They are not meant to be impressive or permanent monuments. Their power lies in their intimacy and their connection to the rhythms of the immediate environment. A personal altar might hold a feather found on a walk, a smooth stone from a river, or a blooming branch from a backyard shrub, constantly changing with the seasons. This practice embodies the minimalist, ephemeral quality of invisible architecture, suggesting that the divine can be honored with the humblest of local materials, and that our spiritual practice can be as dynamic and flowing as nature itself. Underpinning all these trends is a broader cultural hunger for authenticity and direct experience. For many, the journey to a sacred state has become as important as the destination itself. The pilgrimage to find a hidden temple is now mirrored in the decision to hike to a remote mountain summit at dawn to meditate, or to participate in a silent retreat held in a wilderness setting. The setting is no longer a neutral backdrop. It is an active participant in the spiritual process, a co-creator of meaning. This represents a significant move away from spirituality that is handed down through institutional doctrine and towards spirituality that is discovered through personal encounter with the world. It is a democratization of the sacred, suggesting that a profound connection is available to anyone willing to seek it out with an open heart and a mindful presence, without the need for an intermediary. This revival is not a rejection of tradition, but rather a return to its most primal roots, a recognition that long before grand cathedrals and complex theologies, humanity first experienced the divine in the awe-inspiring power of a thunderstorm, the quiet mystery of an ancient forest, and the life-giving sustenance of a freshwater spring. The allure of the invisible temple endures because it speaks to a deep, innate part of our being that yearns to feel part of something larger, to belong to the world rather than merely inhabit it. By looking to these ancient blueprints for harmony, we are rediscovering a path to a spirituality that is not only personally transformative but also inherently ecological, reminding us that caring for the soul and caring for the earth are ultimately one and the same sacred duty. The allure of these hidden sacred spaces extends far beyond the realm of architecture and archaeology, spilling over into our collective imagination through art, literature, and film. Artists have long been fascinated by the concept of invisible temples, using them as powerful metaphors to explore themes of truth, beauty, and the elusive nature of enlightenment itself. These creative interpretations act as a vital bridge, carrying ancient philosophical ideals into the modern consciousness and ensuring they remain vibrant and relevant. In the enchanting animated worlds of Hayao Miyazaki, for instance, we consistently encounter this theme. Films like Princess Mononoke and My Neighbor Totoro are filled with serene, hidden forest shrines and mysterious spirit gates that mark the threshold between the mundane world and a sacred, animated natural realm. These spaces are never grandiose, they are subtle, often overgrown, and discovered only by those characters who approach the world with respect and innocence. Miyazaki doesn't just depict a building, he captures the feeling of discovering something sacred and hidden, a moment of awe that resonates deeply with the viewer and teaches a lesson in humility without a single word of dialogue. Literature, too, has embraced this motif with profound effect. James Hilton's 1933 novel, Lost Horizon, introduced the world to the mythical valley of Shangri-La, a monastery and cultural haven hidden high in the Tibetan mountains, shielded from time and the outside world. The novel's enduring power lies in its depiction of this secluded sanctuary, not as a primitive retreat, but as a sophisticated civilization that chose to remove itself from a world obsessed with conquest and noise. Shangri-La becomes the ultimate invisible temple, a philosophical ideal made manifest in a physical space that is both a refuge and a living library of human wisdom, its very existence a quiet rebuttal to the idea that progress must be loud and imposing. This literary tradition continues in modern works, where hidden temples often serve as settings for personal transformation, representing the internal journey a character must undertake to find a truth that cannot be found in the open. Contemporary artists have taken these concepts from the screen and the page into physical spaces, creating installations that challenge our perceptions directly. Artists like James Turrell work with light and space to create environments that feel both immense and intimate, often dissolving the boundaries of the room itself. His sky spaces are perhaps the perfect modern analog to the celestial temples of old chambers with a precise aperture open to the sky, where the changing light of dawn and dusk transforms the interior into a living canvas, making the solid walls seem to dematerialize. Similarly, installations that use mirrors, camouflage netting, or reflective surfaces create structures that literally vanish into their surroundings in public parks and galleries. These works are not merely optical illusions, they are philosophical provocations. They invite viewers to pause and question what is real, what is natural, and what is constructed, directly engaging with the same questions of perception and presence that the ancient architects explored. This vibrant cultural legacy does more than just entertain, it acts as a crucial keeper of wisdom. In a world increasingly defined by urbanization and digital saturation, these artistic depictions keep the ideal of harmony alive. They remind us of the value of subtlety in an era of overwhelming stimulus and reaffirm the importance of humility in a culture that often celebrates individual boastfulness. Each film that features a hidden shrine, each novel about a lost valley, and each art installation that blends into a landscape serves as a cultural touchstone, passing the baton of this ancient understanding to new generations. They ensure that the conversation about our place in the natural world continues, not as a dusty academic theory, but as a living, breathing, and deeply felt artistic experience. This ongoing dialogue between past and present, between stone and story, proves that the impulse to create spaces of integrated sacredness is a permanent and essential part of the human spirit. But these ancient architects understood that true immersion required engaging more than just the sense of sight. To fully dissolve the boundary between the physical and the spiritual, between the human-made and the natural, they had to create an experience for the ears as well. This is where the genius of sacred acoustics comes into play, a sophisticated manipulation of sound that completed the illusion of disappearance by making the very atmosphere of the temple feel alive, sentient, and deeply connected to the unseen world. Imagine standing in a vast underground chamber, the only light coming from a single shaft far above. The air is cool and still. Then, a single voice begins a low chant. Instead of fading away, the sound seems to multiply, bouncing off the precisely carved walls to create a rich, enveloping tapestry of harmony that feels like it's rising not from a person, but from the earth itself. This wasn't an accident, it was acoustic engineering in the service of spiritual awe. One of the most captivating auditory illusions created in these spaces is the whispering gallery. Found in certain circular or dome-chambered temples, this phenomenon occurs when a sound made against a hard, curved surface is carried along the wall, allowing someone standing far across the space to hear a whisper with startling clarity, as if the speaker were right next to them. The psychological effect is profound. A secret murmured on one side of the room is delivered intact to the other, making it seem as though the architecture itself is acting as a messenger, that the walls are alive and participating in the ritual. This transforms a simple whisper into a moment of magic, reinforcing the idea that the sacred space is not an inert container, but an active, intelligent participant in the worship happening within it. The very stone seems to speak, sharing secrets and amplifying prayers in a way that feels both mysterious and deeply personal. Beyond these deliberate marvels of acoustic design, architects also harnessed the natural soundscape to enhance the feeling of ethereal isolation. The constant, gentle murmur of a flowing stream directed through a channel in the temple floor, or the steady drip of water from a seep in a cave wall, provided a perpetual auditory backdrop. This natural white noise served a brilliant dual purpose. On a practical level, it masked the small, inevitable sounds of human presence, a cough, the rustle of clothing, the scuff of a sandal, that could shatter the sense of immersion and remind worshippers of the mundane world. But on a spiritual level, this endless watery whisper symbolized the constant, flowing presence of the divine, a life force that was always there, just beneath the surface of perception. It created a sonic blanket that wrapped around the individual, making them feel both comfortingly small and intimately connected to the timeless rhythms of the natural world. This multisensory approach was the final, masterful stroke in the design of these disappearing acts. The goal was never just to make a building hard to see. It was to create a total, holistic environment where every sense confirmed the same truth, that the visitor had stepped out of the ordinary world and into a realm where different rules applied. The cool touch of the stone wall, the dim light that made eyes strain and adapt, the way sound behaved in defiance of normal expectations, and the scent of damp earth and incense all worked in concert. When sight, sound, touch, and smell all align to tell you that you are in a place of mystery, the mind readily accepts the illusion. The body itself becomes a tool for perception of the divine, not just a vessel for the eyes to look around. This complete sensory engagement made the sacred experience unforgettable and utterly convincing, proving that the most powerful architecture speaks to our entire being, guiding us not just to look, but to listen, feel, and truly believe in the reality of the invisible. Now, these ancient principles are stepping out of the wilderness and into our concrete jungles, offering a radical new blueprint for urban living. The philosophy of building in harmony with nature, of creating spaces that soothe rather than shout, is being reimagined for the 21st century cityscape. This isn't about carving into cliffs anymore. It's about weaving tranquility into the very fabric of our busiest streets and tallest towers, transforming urban environments from centers of sensory overload into oases of calm and ecological balance. Imagine a city not as a stark monument to human conquest over nature, but as a living, breathing ecosystem where built and natural worlds exist in a mutually supportive dance. This is the powerful potential of applying invisible sacred architecture to urban design, turning our gray skylines green and our noisy streets serene. One of the most visible and beautiful applications of this is the explosion of green roofs and living walls. These are not just token patches of grass. They are sophisticated, engineered ecosystems installed on top of skyscrapers and across the sides of buildings. A rooftop garden on a corporate headquarters, for instance, might feature native wildflowers, sedum mats, and even small trees, creating a haven for pollinators like bees and butterflies high above the traffic. This does far more than just look pretty. It actively battles the urban heat island effect, where vast expanses of concrete and asphalt absorb and radiate heat, making cities several degrees warmer than their surrounding areas. The plants on a green roof provide natural insulation, cooling the building beneath them and releasing moisture into the air through transpiration, effectively giving the city a way to sweat and cool itself down. This single design choice, inspired by the ancient idea of a vegetation-covered temple, addresses energy consumption, climate adaptation, and biodiversity loss all at once. Then there are the structures that embrace the principle of subterranean integration, much like the sunken churches of Lalibela. Across the globe, architects are looking downward for solutions, building libraries, museums, and even transportation hubs partially or entirely underground. The VAC Library in Hanoi, Vietnam, is a stunning example, with its reading rooms nestled within a lush, sunken courtyard that protects visitors from the city's noise and heat. By burying a significant portion of a building's volume, designers drastically reduce its visual footprint on the skyline, preserve precious surface land for parks and public plazas, and leverage the Earth's natural thermal mass to maintain a stable, energy-efficient interior temperature year-round. These spaces offer a profound sense of quiet refuge, a modern-day equivalent of descending into a sacred crypt, where the thick earth muffles the chaos of the city above and encourages focused contemplation. Perhaps the most direct homage to the ancient use of reflective surfaces is found in the sleek, mirror glass skyscrapers now defining modern cities. When designed with intention, these buildings do not seek to dominate. Instead, they act as giant, ever-changing canvases that capture and reflect the sky, the clouds, and the surrounding urban landscape. On a bright day, a tower clad in reflective glass can appear to dissolve into the blue expanse, its hard edges vanishing against the backdrop of the heavens. This clever illusion reduces the visual weight and clutter of the built environment, preventing the oppressive canyon effect of sheer concrete and steel. It visually opens up the city, creating a feeling of lightness and space where there is none, and constantly reminding us of the natural world above, even when we are surrounded by man-made structures. This application transforms a building from an object to be looked at into a lens for seeing the world around it in a new way. The benefits of this approach extend far beyond the merely aesthetic. they are deeply psychological and physiological. Studies in environmental psychology consistently show that access to green space, natural light, and quiet environments significantly reduces stress, lowers blood pressure, and improves overall mental well-being. An urban park designed to feel like a wild meadow with winding paths and native plantings is not just a pretty place for lunch. It is a crucial mental health resource, a place for city dwellers to experience the restorative effects of biophilia, our innate human desire to connect with nature. By incorporating these elements of disappearance and integration, urban planners aren't just building cities, they are curating experiences that actively combat the anxiety and alienation so often associated with metropolitan life. This modern application of ancient wisdom proves that the sacred doesn't have to be confined to a temple. It can be cultivated on a rooftop, discovered in a sunken courtyard, or glimpsed in the reflection of a skyscraper, offering moments of peace and connection amid the beautiful chaos of urban life. So what does all of this mean for you and me, right here, right now, in our daily lives filled with digital notifications and endless to-do lists? The profound lesson of these invisible temples isn't something we have to travel to a distant continent to understand. It's a philosophy we can weave into the very fabric of our modern existence. This ancient wisdom challenges our deepest modern assumptions about success and legacy, pushing back against a culture that screams at us to build higher, shout louder, and leave a mark that will last forever. These quiet, crumbling stones whisper a different, more liberating truth, that there is immense power and peace in learning to let go, in embracing the beauty of the ephemeral, and in finding our strength through integration rather than domination. Think about our own personal struggles with impermanence. We fight against the aging process. We cling to outdated relationships or careers out of fear of the unknown. And we fill our homes with possessions in a desperate attempt to create a sense of permanence in a world that is inherently fluid. The invisible temple offers a different model. It shows us that decay is not failure. It is simply the next phase in a continuous cycle of transformation. We can apply this by learning to appreciate the fleeting moments, the perfect, quiet cup of coffee before the house wakes up, the brilliant autumn leaf that will be gone tomorrow, the heartfelt conversation with a loved one that exists only in memory. By valuing these transient experiences without trying to cling to them or post them for validation, we train ourselves to be present. We start to see that a life well lived isn't measured by the mountain of things we accumulate, but by the depth and richness of our moments of genuine connection and awareness. This also calls for a radical kind of humility in how we move through the world. The architects of these temples understood that they were not the masters of the landscape, but its students and collaborators. We can adopt this same stance. It might look like designing a corner of our home not as a showcase for our wealth, but as a mindful space that brings us peace, a chair by a window that catches the morning light, a small altar with found objects from nature, a room painted a calming color that makes us feel held. It means making choices that reduce our visible impact on the planet, not as a burden, but as an act of reverence. Choosing to walk or bike instead of drive, repairing an item instead of replacing it, supporting local producers. These are all modern expressions of that ancient desire to blend in harmoniously, to be a respectful part of an ecosystem rather than a disruptive force upon it. Ultimately, the most powerful takeaway is the paradoxical idea that to truly find ourselves, we must be willing to lose ourselves. The pilgrim who seeks the hidden temple must surrender their agenda and their ego to follow the path. We can do the same. We can disappear into the flow state of a creative project, losing all track of time and self-consciousness. We can disappear into the service of our community, finding purpose in connection rather than personal acclaim. We can disappear into the simplicity of a walk in a park, allowing our busy minds to quiet down and our senses to tune into the rustling leaves and the bird songs. This isn't about literally vanishing. It's about shifting our focus from building a permanent, monumental identity for others to see, to cultivating a flexible, authentic presence that is deeply connected to the world around us. The invisible temples teach us that the greatest legacy we can leave may have nothing to do with being remembered, and everything to do with having lived a life of thoughtful, harmonious, and beautifully transient meaning. The invisible temples of the world stand as powerful, silent testaments to a different kind of human genius, one that measures its success not by its ability to dominate a landscape, but by its profound capacity to become one with it. These are not stories of conquest written in stone, but poems of harmony whispered into the very fabric of the earth. From the breathtaking rock-cut caves of India to the ethereal submerged shrines of Japan, these sacred spaces issue a gentle but urgent challenge to our modern perceptions. They ask us to recalibrate our senses, to find the divine not in the glaring and the grandiose, but in the subtle, the transient, and the patiently revealed. In a world that often feels increasingly loud, fractured, and disconnected, the quiet philosophy embedded in these structures offers something we desperately need: a timeless blueprint for a more sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, and deeply harmonious way of existing on this planet. This blueprint is profoundly practical. The ancient principles of using local materials, leveraging the Earth's natural insulation, and designing for passive climate control are no longer just historical curiosities. They are urgently relevant strategies for modern green architecture. As we grapple with the escalating crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, these temples teach us that the most respectful way to build is to leave the lightest possible footprint. They show us that true sustainability isn't about inventing complex new technologies to fix our problems, but about rediscovering a simpler, more intelligent way of working with nature rather than against it. This is a lesson in humility that echoes from the past into our present, reminding us that our survival and well-being are inextricably linked to the health of the ecosystems we inhabit. But the legacy of these spaces is so much more than just an environmental manual. It is a profound spiritual invitation. In an age of endless digital distraction and surface-level connection, the invisible temple offers a different path. It champions the value of the journey over the destination, the depth of introspection over the ease of spectacle, and the personal revelation that comes from mindful seeking. It argues that the most meaningful truths are not found in the headlines or the feeds, but in the quiet corners of our world and the quiet spaces within ourselves. By choosing subtlety over shouting, these architects created spaces that demand our full presence, that require us to slow down, to look closer, and to listen more carefully to the whispers of the natural world and our own inner voice. I truly hope this exploration has sparked a new way of seeing for you. Perhaps it will inspire you to seek out the hidden natural spots in your own community, to notice how the light changes a familiar place at a certain time of day, or to simply advocate for more thoughtful, green design in your own city. The principles of the invisible temple aren't locked away in distant lands. They are a living philosophy we can integrate into our daily lives, our homes, and our communities. If this journey into the world of vanishing sacred spaces has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your reflections and personal discoveries in the comments below. And if you want to join us for more deep dives into the mysteries of our world, be sure to subscribe. As we part ways, remember this final thought. In a culture that often equates value with visibility and success with size, the enduring power of these places reminds us of a beautiful paradox. Sometimes the most sacred things, the most profound truths, the deepest connections, the most lasting peace, are not those that clamor for our attention in the bright light of day. They are those that choose to remain just out of sight, waiting patiently for us to approach with open hearts, mindful eyes, and the willingness to discover the magic hidden in plain